Welcome. You lost? Don't you worry, the stars will guide us. I'll tell you what they have to say. Following the rescue of Mela, the young inventor in Enosh who never wanted to be rescued, the boys headed down to the island of somewhere. It's a harsh place. The desert stretches for miles. Big skies, hidden in the fancy districts between awnings and tunnels that shade the oasis there. And our boys weren't there to drink and gamble as most tourists are. They needed to find Lachlan. Lachlan's the leader of a gang called the Wandering Winds, an ex-lover of Kian's, stuck in jail. Also, he's a vampire. Turns out Kian's vampiric qualities are the fault of Lachlan. He tried to turn him to save him during some accident out in the oceans. And it turns out Lachlan's imprisonment is the fault of Kian's. Kian's patron, Aelin Celestial, got him arrested, angered that he'd hurt Kian. It makes him even. Maybe. Anyways. Entering somewhere is a concerning thing with this group.
Under what charges did you end up in paradise?
There was a bounty out for the crew I was running with. There was three of us. Called ourselves the Clipper Crew. Like the boot brand.
They arrived and met with Ophelia, a drow friend of Kian's who's been stuck here waiting to get Lachlan out.
Did they have some sort of outstanding bounty?
She pauses for a moment. No.
Understand this, it is not a problem if he has. Not all of us here are law-abiding citizens ourselves.
It's wonderful to know that I'm surrounded by criminals. She smiles as she says it. But I don't think so. Certainly, we've done some things under the table in the past, but never... I've never seen a wanted sign with our faces on it or anything like that. I don't want to go around there, because I was with him around the time he was caught. I don't know if it's safe.
She's been staying at Star Under the Sea, a lovely inn run by a mysterious woman called Simone. Both Ox and Kian know her for her widespread connections. Despite these connections, the boys decide to get Lachlan out the legal way. Virgil, our man who once donned a uniform, heads to the sheriff. He says she owes him a favor for something his squadron, the Dawn Shepherds, did for her in the past.
What exactly is it, that you can do for me if I help you out with something like this? I mean, you're asking me to go above the law. Can't just do that because I know you.
No, but I figure if it is a matter of paying a bail, well, that mirror we gave you a while back was not worth a small amount of coin.
That's true, but
And as you'll recall, we weren't under any sort of obligation to be dishing out such rare magical items.
See her lips tighten as you interrupt her. And at the time, you did not say that there was a price to your kindness.
She doesn't break her own rules so easy. But if Virgil's friend Henry Goodlove will hand the Goodlove rail line from somewhere to Dawning over to her wife, Magdala Brenna, she may be willing. Magdala, or Maggie, as you may recall, is the engineer Henry once left waiting at the altar. Seems she's happily married now.
Won't we get the bad news out of the way first?
Or the good news? We'll leave it up to Virgil.
Well, for one of you this is good news, for another it is bad, so I will say that first, I suppose. Mr. Goodlove here is the one who will be paying for your friend's release.
Really, everyone seems to be under the impression that I have a lot more money than I actually hold.
Oh, it is not about money, my friend. But the sheriff did seem amenable to the release of your friend on this one condition. Henry, you seem to have made a rather colorful impression on Sheriff Donna and her wife. It seems the 200 gold recompense is a start to a larger conversation. Seeing as how Maggie is running the line from here to Dawning and back so efficiently, she seems to think that her wife would do a better job having total control over it. And perhaps your parents might be willing to negotiate this.
No, I don't think they'd be very open to negotiating that actually at all. I mean,
Not even to talking about partnership? Securing the relationship with someone would be quite a feat, and I feel a track is a rather small price to pay in the overall scheme of things.
Henry's not so eager about this deal, but he calls up his daddies anyways. They decide to head on down to fix up the situation. But there are delays, and more delays. Something's up in Enosh. Your trip gets extended 2-3 weeks. As the boys wait, Virgil starts to see things a little differently. It seems his night vision is continuing to improve. Kian talks to his patron, that young celestial who's responsible for Lachlan's arrest. They show him what happened, from their point of view. It wasn't hard to tempt Lachlan when they can look just like Kian.
It's not hard to fall asleep deeper there. Before you do, you see a few things. You see Lachlan up on a small platform. It's outdoors. It looks very handmade, but there's a huge crowd. There's another figure up there too, wearing a large brimmed hat, almost similar fashion to him, but with long skirts, playing the fiddle. You see Lachlan meet your eyes. You see him run after you. And you're looking over your shoulder and he's running after you. You see someone appear behind him with a large, looks like maybe a crowbar, bash him in the back of the head. He falls. You turn around the corner. And you fall asleep.
Virgil tried to identify his earring using Ophelia's magic, and it doesn't go well.
And she pulls her hand away. And opens her eyes and looks over at you, and she looks sort of confused. And there are just tears streaming down her cheeks.
Are you alright? He puts the earring back on.
Yes, I don't know. That's never happened before. Sorry. She gets up and so you walk over to the bathroom and close the door.
It turns out it's not his, not originally.
Well, I met Rowan when we were just recruits for the Dawn Shepherds program. Over time, we grew close, and closer still when we passed the final test and were officially designated as shepherds. And so we began taking missions, and Rowan was singled out for a more ambitious and far more dangerous path. He never told me exactly what happened in his training sessions. He was very secretive about it, but he began to exhibit this sort of unnatural speed and strength in those early days, and over time we began to see a physical change on the battlefield as well. They taught him how to change into a sort of beast and harness its bloodlust on the battlefield to fight in the name of Dawning. But the more he came to rely upon this ability, the more he struggled with control. We made our concerns clear, and our commander, she did our best to support our case, but it invested far too much in Rowan to simply have him put these abilities to the wayside, and one day it became too much for him. He didn't seem to be able to recognize us. Dawning hushed it up. The official story is that the Dawn Shepherds died honorably in battle. And perhaps it's better that way. I wouldn't want him remembered at his worst.
He can't fully understand it. If Ophelia can't do it, perhaps he'll have to do some studying on his own. In the meantime, Kian spies on Lachlan and sees he's roughed up more and more each day. So they decide that's enough. And without waiting for Henry's daddies to arrive and for the complications of transferring a rail line, they pull a jailbreak.
12 days at this point. I'm not sure. What are you thinking?
Marigolds can get in pretty easily.
Yes?
Just has to wait for the right time. It's kind of all about timing. And she can carry something with her.
And he pulls out the bag of holding from his bag.
Well, I don't really need to breathe. Neither does he. I'm not quite sure if I can open it from the inside. But if we let him know, he could let me out. Could untie him. Both get in the bag. Just have to make sure somebody opens the door for Marigold. It's not completely risk-free. I think if somebody were to catch her, well, if the bag gets ripped, we're both in the astral sea forever, so... She hasn't been caught yet.
With invisible familiars and bags of holding and a boy who doesn't need to breathe, they sneak Lachlan out of that cell without the guards batting an eye. Lucky bunch. Lachlan and Cian talk, fight. Well, there's plenty for these two to figure out. Cian explains his celestial patron's story. Cian's not so happy Lachlan tried to turn them.
And I wouldn't have wanted it that way. I think you knew that.
How was I supposed to do? You know, when you're out in the oceans and someone dead in your arms and there's not really anything you can do for them, don't have time to bring him home, magic's not working, most of the time that person just stays dead. Would you prefer that? You think I would have done that?
I'm happy to be here right now.
You have a funny way of showing it then. Glances back at Ox to you.
Why do you keep glancing at him?
You think I wouldn't recognize him?
Lachlan's also suspicious that Cian's new friend, Ox, looks so much like the person who played up on stage with him the night he was caught. Ox explains that was his twin sister, Scar. How she was involved is still a mystery to these boys. After a long discussion, stories are set straight as they can be. Lachlan's arrest isn't Cian's fault. Cian's changing happened to save his life. It's too late to go back to how things were, but it's not too late for forgiveness.
And just goes to the door and opens it really fast.
Lachlan sort of jumps as the door opens and turns around to you. Forget something?
I'm sorry. I know I might not see you again for a very long time, if ever. Could I just have one last hug before I go?
Sure.
Good luck out there.
Thanks. He pulls back, has his hands on Cian's shoulder. It's good to know you're not as terrible as I thought you were. It wasn't all bad, was it?
No. Those are probably some of the best years of my life.
Mine too.
Now Lachlan and Ophelia have departed on their separate ways. Ophelia left a feather from her familiar for Ox, just in case he needs to reach her someday. Now the boys wait for Henry's daddies to arrive, and Metal Goodlove finally lands in somewhere.
He has branching antlers, sort of like a deer, that are commonly seen in hoofed tieflings, that are capped with delicate silver jewelry and jade stones that kind of matches his skin tone. Their gaze finally lands on Henry, and they sort of turn to whoever's beside them, sort of give a wait motion, and push their way through the crowd, dragging a large suitcase behind them. Sets the suitcase to the side, embraces you, holds you very tightly.
Henry very easily returns the motion.
They're not alone. He's accompanied by an unexpected guest for Virgil.
Did you have a name for this person?
Yui?
Excuse me. He goes over, stops right before her, and kind of ducks a little bit into her field of view. Is that you?
She glances up, freezes for a moment, and you, of course, recognize Nico.
So, they've got some help at their side, but they're stuck with a new problem. How do they pretend they know nothing of that little jailbreak in the middle of this deal with Sheriff Donna? Quiet now. Listen. They'll tell us. Hey, it's your narrator speaking. Thank you for joining us here at SpareTheCrying. You can follow our boys a little closer over at SpareTheCrying Podcast on TikTok and Instagram, and at SpareTheCrying on Twitter. The tunes for our tale were created by Marika Shans, and our intro by Ben McElroy. The official art was by our own Corey, who provides the voice of Virgil Flores. We'd love to hear from you all, so if you please, you can leave a rating or review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube. Thanks again for listening to our tale. Hope we meet again, underneath my stars or yours.